Welcome back to TECcast. For this episode, we sat down, or really I should say walked and talked, with Dr. Stephen Siperstein, who took us on an adventure through the woods of the KEC while we enjoyed some inspired conversation. Stephen lives with his family at the KEC, where he teaches the multidisciplinary, solutions and hope-oriented course titled Climate Change, From Knowledge to Action. Additionally, Stephen teaches in the English department and directs the Writing Center. Beyond Choate, Stephen serves as the co-editor of the collection Teaching Climate Change in the Humanities. He has a chapter forthcoming in a new MLA book on teaching climate change in literature, and he co-directs the Environmental Literature Institute at Phillips Exeter Academy. We originally planned to hold this conversation in late fall, but various emergencies got in the way until we finally made it happen in early spring. As Marcus Aurelius said, the obstacle is the way. The difficulties in scheduling this conversation forced us to accept fate and realize that instead of publishing once per term, we should just release all 3 episodes together in the summer as part of Tectonic, which we plan to do going forward. Anyway, just wanted to be clear about that up front because despite the fall visuals and the sounds of crunching leaves beneath our feet, you might hear a few references to early spring in our dialogue. So let's get into it. We touched on teaching in the pandemic, embodied and experiential learning, the wonderful book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, how Stephen's musical sensibilities inform his teaching style, the importance of seeing things through the lens of magic and imagination, Ken Wilber's idea of the pre-trans fallacy, how to incorporate well-being into the curriculum, the role of self-evaluation in the learning process, the wonders of broadleaf plantain, paying attention as a moral act, and the joy inherent in tapping into the wisdom of our very own Choate community. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Stephen Siperstein.
Students feel that way. They want to connect with the world in other ways or reconnect.
We were just talking about this a little bit in ITC today, that people, our whole community, and this is beyond Choate as well, but we're talking in the context of Choate, students and faculty alike, our relationship with technology is one that is intrinsically laced with trauma in the wake of everything with COVID. Right? There was this period, I was talking with a colleague who I used to teach with at Avon Old Farms, and now he does this same academic tech support stuff down at Sidwell Friends. And he said, let me read this exact message. It's very pertinent. We catch him on the phone every so often, and he mentioned after that conversation, one thing that continues to resonate with me from our conversation is how faculty negatively perceive of a new initiative or new idea when they are burnt out. There was this amazing period at the beginning of COVID where teachers were all in on tech. Since then, I have been getting buried by this problem for years now. We had to use it to fill in all the gaps, the things that we took for granted in building class community. And then, all meetings, everything was online, and everyone started getting understandably burnt out from overuse of technology and having the virtual student things and trying to do both an online and an in-person class at the same time. And a lot of people, I think, ended up having this reaction where they just wanted to take a step away from digital technology.
Sure. There's the Zoom fatigue, there's the staring at a screen for too long fatigue. But also, I don't think it's burnt out from the technology use. Right. It's burnt out from the way in which technology was being framed as what we had to do to keep things normal or get back to normal, or using technology to fulfill institutional demands or pressures and whatnot. It's interesting what you just read from your friend, because I've been thinking a lot about that recently, about those first just 3 months. We'll call them the first 3 months, that first term. And, I still think back and believe that it was my best term ever teaching. Unequivocally. I thought it was the most impactful and most meaningful experience I had teaching. And I also think I did some of my best work as a teacher. And I'm now I'm always trying to think back and recapture parts of that. It just, there was a joy to those Zoom classes.
Yeah.
Which is like weird, paradoxical, right? But this like sense of coming together and being present, albeit disconnected from each other, in a way of like we're in this shared moment of upheaval, and the best we can do is like be together, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I had some sort of motto for my classes that term that was like, I don't know, I don't remember exactly, but it was like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna read some shit, we're gonna write some shit, we're gonna talk about some shit, and we're gonna just be together and try to find nourishment in reading, writing, talking, being together. And the leeway that I gave students and that students had, and without grades.
Yep.
Right, okay,
Huge.
we should mention that.
Acknowledge
right?
that.
Without the grades, it was just like, what do you need right now?
Right. Yeah.
What do you need? And then how can, for me, for my discipline, right, how can an English class, how can what we do in English or do in the humanities meet those needs? Be a form of shelter, be a form of nourishment, be a form of connection. You know, and so I remember one group, small group of students decide, hey, we're going to do this project where we curate poems that might be conceptualized as poems of shelter that can shelter the spirit in this time of crisis. And we're going to write letters to people living in nursing homes or rehabilitation centers or whatever. And that was their project for the term. Or another group that put together like a COVID justice zine. And that was what they did for that term.
Yeah.
And the learning was impactful. They were doing things and sharing them with the community. There was a purpose. It was great.
Yeah, I remember.
And I'm being too nostalgic, right? Obviously, there was fear and uncertainty and lack of access to things, and that was a hard time.
Yeah.
But there were also these glimpses or glimmers of what could be possible.
Yeah.
In the same way that more broadly in society, there were like glimpses or glimmers of mutual aid, solidarity. And the author Arundhati Roy has this article that I love that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. The title, which was "The Pandemic is a Portal." A portal, right? That it opened something up, and the choice was, do we step through that door into this other world that might be possible? Or do we not, and try to resist that and go back to normal? And I think that is true on the level of thinking about education too.
Yeah.
Things were possible, right?
Yeah.
And then there was this reactionary sense of get back to normal.
I remember when all that was starting to go down, and we also at that time had this all faculty Microsoft Teams space, and I remember you posted something.
For sure.
It was like, hey, here's this thing I'm doing at the start of classes.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you referred to. What do you most need as a student and just human in this moment right now? And I did that with my classes and shared it with some other people I was talking to. And so from you posting that there, multiple other classes ended up doing that. And that was such an important thing for those students. I remember hearing from them at the end of the term that setting that tone right at the beginning really helped them just open up and go with whatever we were going to do right there. They built this communal trust. And in a way where it flipped the script from, I, the student, what do I need to do for you to please you to get my grade? To, I, the teacher, how can I show up? What kind of environment can we cultivate together? And it had nothing to do with grades, of course. So what kind of environment can we cultivate together to, at baseline, get through this together and hopefully actually experience good joy and comfort in these things that we were maybe tacitly getting pre-COVID from various things we were involved in, and then suddenly when we had to just stop life as normal, where people were like, oh wait, I need these human things, it created the space for those needs to be met in the context of our classes. It was so beautiful. What kinds of things that emerged during that time have you felt yourself able to maintain now?
It's a great question. It's hard to think of like the specific practices. I don't know if I have maintained specific practices. I think for me, like an ethos of tenderness, teaching with tenderness, which is an idea that I'm taking from Bettina Love, who's a Black abolitionist, educator, philosopher, and she's written a lot about like tenderness. But this idea of being tender with each other in the classroom, whether the classroom is online or outside or in a traditional classroom, and part of that for me is like how to create a sense of hospitality. The classroom as a laboratory for care, wonder, and tenderness, and how do we welcome students into that space in an embodied way, in an emotional way, in an intellectual way, in a spiritual way perhaps. And like you were saying, for those opening activities, you know, on a Zoom class, right? Those check-ins, those games, those, you know, for one of my classes, I start every Zoom class that spring with dancing. We put a playlist together. We all added to the playlist. Every day was a different student's song. They got to lead the dance. If you didn't want to dance, don't dance.
Yeah.
Chill out. Do what you need to do. Take care of yourself, right?
Yeah.
But for people who want to dance, it was a way of being active, be embodied, be together, moments of joy.
Yeah.
And it created this sense of hospitality, right? Welcoming everyone into this space, Zoom space. And so I do still try to hold on to that ethos, that philosophy kind of in my classes. I love this.
Yeah, what are they doing over here?
Students are coming by now with big wheelbarrows filled with soil and looks like seedlings of various sorts.
Okay.
And they're putting in a new garden bed. Here.
Oh, so they're going to bring them all around right here?
They're going to bring it around.
Okay.
I think they're planting some
Fantastic.
pawpaw trees, some other native plants. You know, we couldn't do this in the pandemic, right?
Right.
Great, we're going back to stuff like this. The experiential learning.
Yeah.
Right. The embodied practices, the connecting with the world. So much joy in the connection happening right here. Right? Isn't this great?
It's so great.
Students are just kind of like figuring out how to use a shovel right now.
Yep.
And encountering the way that the soil is quite hard packed up here in certain areas. I'll just make this transition.
Yeah.
This fall, I chose to teach Braiding Sweetgrass by Ravawal Kimmer. She is a plant biologist, author. Actually, this fall she received the MacArthur Genius Grant.
Right. Yes.
Big deal,
Yes.
right?
Big deal.
And her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, has been in the New York Times bestseller list now for over 100 weeks. A lot of weeks. And she is an indigenous author and scientist. She's Potawatomi. And I've taught like selections of her work before, but never the whole book.
Never the whole book.
Never
And this
the
was
whole
the
book.
first year you
This
did.
is the first year I chose a selfish choice in part, but selfish isn't bad sometimes. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to just like lean in this year to the things that I love.
Yeah.
And I love this book.
And
So,
it's you're given that curricular freedom.
yeah,
So
Right.
lean into it.
for sure. And the book is a tapestry, a weaving of all sorts of different threads, but it's structured in a way that there's these sections for folks who are listening to this and haven't kind of seen the book before, and I encourage people to read it. It's amazing.
Really.
Talk about a book that's like nourishing for the soul
absolutely.
and the spirit. She structures her book in these sections called planting sweetgrass, tending sweetgrass, picking sweetgrass, and so braiding sweetgrass, burning sweetgrass. And one of the things I tried to do when our experience moving through this book together in my class up in the KEC was to have a kind of experiential component to each section as we were reading it, right? So we did work, we went out and did planting. We went out and did like tending plants in the garden or the greenhouse. We went out when we were reading chapters from the picking sweetgrass chapter and went out and did harvesting together. This was the fall, like a late harvest of potatoes and pawpaws and things like that. that, students remarked that those were some of the best moments. Because there was like community building, and there was learning that was happening that was not predictable. It was messy. It was literally messy. Soil on the hands, right? Right. Soil on your pants. Falling out of trees, trying to pick pawpaws. Sort of like feeling the prick of black raspberry vines in the garden. Messiness, and I thought that was perfect for this book in particular because of what you were just saying of like, this is not simple and it's not a binary. It's sort of the kind of thinking and complexity of thinking that has its parallel and roots in the world, the more than human worlds of ecosystems, the complexity of a garden. Anyway.
Yes.
That was great. And learning outside the classroom, traditional classroom.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that was one of the things that the pandemic absolutely forced us to reconsider is like, what the hell do we mean by classroom?
Yeah.
Like, it's, and definitely found that the more physical locations you can end up holding class, it absolutely strengthens the bonds with everyone. And I'm pretty sure there is like actual scientific research backing this kind of thing up. If you go to multiple locations with another person, you feel that much more bonded with that person than if you were just sitting for the same amount of time in one location.
Oh, absolutely. Right. Connectedness.
Yeah. As I'm feeling right now, being out here.
Because it's like, there was this moment of like, oh, we're all trapped in these Zoom boxes.
Yep.
Right? The pandemic, teaching on Zoom and whatnot.
Yep.
But that's like, traditional classrooms at Choate, for example, are boxes too.
They are.
We're all sitting in the same uncomfortable chairs that are not made for different kinds of bodies and different kinds of like movement and different kinds of experience. And
within our building.
As much as I love Harkness tables, which I love the ethos of sitting around a Harkness table. That's one mode.
Yes.
But it doesn't have to be the privileged mode. There's other ways. And learning in the field it's my passion.
Yeah.
I love taking students in the field.
Yeah.
Taking a group of young people. That article I think I sent you. The one I wrote about
the broken world teaching.
The broken world teaching.
Yes.
The experience of taking students onto a glacier as part of a grappling with the impacts of climate change, and also having them experience what it means to become a leader, out in the field, on a backpacking trip, hiking, exploring a glacier, and
even when you don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying the connection with place is more visceral. The connection with each other, right, with their fellow students and teachers and learners is more visceral and powerful, and the connection with their deepest, truest selves gets really powerful, and really cool stuff happens.
Yeah.
When things are unpredictable.
Because it's, you create the space for life to happen. If the approach to teaching a subject is, here is this content, because that's what it's about, and we're going to lay it out in this way that might make perfect logical sense. Like, yes, these concepts build on each other, and we have to go here, and then we go here, and then we go here. The second students receive that, it is. This may be a controversial statement, but I genuinely feel it is dead on arrival. It's like, here's what we're doing.
Right.
And it's not saying that the content isn't important. It is. But it's like, how do you let the content be alive in the context of where all the humans in the space are showing up from? And the more you can do exactly what you're saying, where you organically let the interest kind of emerge, you might even toss out something with no context or preface or anything, just to get some kind of reaction, see where that goes, and then now we need to go in this direction because it inspired these kind of responses, and then they're so bought in, and you don't need grades.
No. They don't need motivation from the outside.
Right.
It's all coming from within and from each other.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, here's a text. We can approach it in a way that it's like dead, like a dead text to study. Or, I'm thinking now of what I mentioned a moment ago with the hospitality and the welcoming thing, right? It's like, how do you welcome students, right, into, in our discipline, like a text, a book, right? And turn it into like a living space that we can like dwell in together, play in together, learn in together.
That is why I am so passionate about, we've had conversations about this, and you've used some of this technology here and there. I don't know what your current state of affairs is with it, but hypothesis, collaborative annotation of text, I've found is just amazing. And it's not an either or. It's like, I think the thing that I've really settled on is everyone still has to get the physical book. And the first thing you're doing is, ideally outside, if it's nice weather, you read the physical book and you mark it up just like you have in this lovely copy, because that's your opportunity for you and the author to commune and have that direct.
Is that what you always do?
Yep. And then once you have made that pass with just you and the author without any outside influence, then jump into the collaborative text and share your most salient annotations. Then it helps that collaborative space feel not too overwhelming, because sometimes you might have a kid who like is a very prolific annotator and they're all great stuff, but it could be too much for other people. So you say, hey, just share the things that you really want to put out there for the class. So then everyone has their personal space that's using the distraction-free interface of the paper book, and the shared space where we are having conversations with each other on the source material itself. So much more powerful than a disembodied discussion board thread where people are awkwardly trying to make references to the text, and maybe we'll put a page number in there, here, there, maybe. But when you could actually open space to have conversations on the text itself before you even get into the classroom, and then also have people record a quick stream of consciousness flip video, kind of summarizing what they got out of the chapter. Having all that work prior to going into the class makes it so that the class discussion environment can be that much more free-flowing and organic, because everyone has a little glimpse into what other people are kind of starting to think about and relate to. And you mentioned earlier leaving the classroom, leaving kids to talk. I do that routinely as well. Well, I have Otter, this live transcript software going, and there have been a couple days where the entire class, I just go in, say, all right, the Otter's running, I'll come back in at the end. And while they are speaking, I have the live Zoom, so I'm like, then they know this, so we lay it out. But I'm technically listening, but I'm not physically in the space, so I'm not imposing the feeling of like, well, there's this teacher that we have to do. And that sprung up on one day when I had F block a couple years ago, and it was like the third weekend, and it was that, Tuesday morning F block before a school meeting that no one wants to get up for. And I was just like, hey, I feel like you guys need some more space to just kind of get to know each other. So started the Otter, went away and let them just talk. And meanwhile, my contributions were not verbally disrupting the flow of conversation, but dropping relevant links and things on the Otter transcript. So it was augmenting, but letting them fully dictate the direction of the main, conversation.
That's cool. We did a digital version of Thoreau's Walden this year, which I haven't taught actually Thoreau or Walden since way before the pandemic, but we used an online version of the text, but when we finished, I regretted that they didn't also have a physical copy. So now, thank you for that. I'm going to also next time have them have because there were days we wanted to just like go outside and not have devices.
Exactly, right.
And that wasn't possible. Those F block Tuesday, right?
Whew. And Thursday. F block.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. My winter term F block class was my climate change class, and we, at a certain point, we just would start every Tuesday F block with either doing yoga, Pilates, like a little joy workout.
Nice.
One student was a Pilates instructor, so she would have a lot of fun, like leading us in a little active thing to engage our bodies. And
that's great.
Of course, students could opt out.
Yeah.
You need to just lie on the floor, but yeah.
I'm curious if any of your proclivities toward music have informed your teaching style? Like the last thing that you said before we went in there reminded me of that.
That's a deep question.
Yeah.
I thought you were going somewhere else. I thought you were going to ask if I like actively bring music into the classroom. But right, so I started playing guitar when I was 9 or 10. Played piano for a while, went back to guitar. Learned jazz guitar, got into slide guitar for a while. But the thing I most love is improvisation. Mm-hmm. And whether in jazz or in rock or blues or whatever, noodling.
Yeah.
Messing around.
Right.
Improving. And I suppose that the most joy I get in teaching is when the moments of improvisation happen. And I saw you had a question up on the Padlet with the questions from like previous podcasts you've done.
Yep.
And one of them was, what do you do or what happens when something goes wrong?
Oh, yes.
And it's like when something goes wrong, that means something has like broken in your plan or expectation, right? And something unexpected happens. And it's like, oh, I hit an unexpected note. And like, what is that doing now? Where is it leading me? What other notes are possible now that I hit that note that maybe seemed off or wrong?
Yes,
and like,
yes.
all right, how do you keep going? Like, what do we do with this? And like, can you give students that same sort of ethos of what mistakes, we think of them as mistakes, open up, make possible? In terms of learning, in terms of exploring, in terms of creativity, in terms of discovering things about themselves. So I love that question because I just made that connection. Because I do love, and of course when you're noodling and you're improvising and it's like, oh, I just switched modes.
Yep.
Or like, oh, this note that I played is not in the scale I was working with, but it's leading me to this other scale. Or something is calling me to switch from minor to major. And what do you do with that moment? You can resist it. You can pretend like it didn't happen, or you lean into it and see where it leads you. And maybe that's part of my ethos as teaching. Can I just point out?
Yes, please.
This is I love early spring. I mean, I love all of spring. But the trout lilies are coming up through the leaf litter. It's these leaves.
Oh, sweet.
Are trout lilies, and when I see a flower, I'll show you. They bloom these.
Wait, which ones?
These the mottled ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
These mottled leaves, and when they first come, they're edible.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And when but really only when they first come out, when they're young, they're tender, and then they get a bit more, if you want, to munch. You don't want to eat too many of them because I think they're kind of like a laxative.
Oh, okay.
They have that effect.
Cool.
But they're a little
sweet.
A little sweet, a little lemony. It's some flavor. Just wanted to point it out.
Yeah.
Trout lilies. I love the first flowers of springs in these woods.
Are they called trout lilies because of the pattern? It kind of looks like what a trout would have.
It's a great question. I don't know why they're called trout lilies. But if I can, I'll look for. Oh, there's the blossom.
Oh, cool. Oh, nice.
The little yellow,
Yeah.
they're kind of arc downward. And I'm pretty sure this is a time when a lot of the bumblebees come out, and bumblebees burrow.
Okay.
So they come out of the soil, and these flowers are kind of arced over to attract the bumblebees that are coming out. Yeah.
I had meant to actually.
See, isn't it great we're in the woods?
What?
Isn't it great we're in the woods?
It's so fantastic. Yeah, I'm
this
so
is
glad.
what I love with students. There's the bumblebee.
Hey, there it is.
Yeah.
Look at
Yeah, I love the woods.
that. Yeah,
And
I'm
so just
glad
taking
you
students
see
into
this.
the woods and seeing what happens is just my greatest joy. Seeing what we can get curious about. That's my motto with Nate now. He even repeats this. ABC. Always be curious.
Hey, yeah,
About everything.
right.
If we can find it, I'll keep my eyes open for it. One of the students in the environmental literature course that they were doing those Thoreau projects, her project was she came out into the woods every day for a week and built fairy houses. And then today she had us do an activity where she asked everyone to sketch their ideal fairy house. And then she showed us these portfolio of photographs she had done. Like, she made fairy houses and then took beautiful photos of them.
Oh, cool.
It was great.
Yeah. Man,
Yeah, and it was, as she framed it, it turned into an experiment in rediscovering her childhood and like what it means to be a child in the world and see things through the lens of magic and imagination. So it got very deep and beautiful. And talking about creativity and you know, as Thoreau, she made this connection to Thoreau, you know, writes in Walden something like, "I'm sad that I will never be as wise as I was on the day I was born." And he gets at this idea of like that we are educated out of our imaginations and our creativity, which of course Sir Ken Robinson, right, in a more modern context,
we were just talking about that
writes
in class
about.
today.
Also, I just want to point out, and you know, it was really a blessing to 5 years ago at this point to spend some time with Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Okay, that's something I want to ask you about. I thought that was the case. Tell me more.
You know, there's just this, you know, especially this one morning that she led a workshop. This was for the Environmental Literature Institute that I co-direct up in Exeter. And she came for us and gave a keynote and talked with people and led a workshop, which was basically her taking us through the woods. And it opened up, it was one of the best experiences of my life.
Wow.
In a professional sense and spiritual sense, that every 5 feet we walked, she would stop and greet a plant, a kin, right? And then tell us about the plant and all the gifts that it offers us, right, as humans. And so it just gave me this way of moving through the world as always being attuned to the gifts that are all around us. And then from that cultivating a spirit of and a practice of gratitude, and then after gratitude, reciprocity. So I really try to craft experiences where students can have those same sorts of experiences of sort of seeing the world through this lens of like gift and this lens of abundance.
Yes.
Right? Not a lens of scarcity, which we're great at emphasizing at Choate. But abundance. There's enough, right? There's these gifts all around us. So, you know, the trout lilies.
Yeah.
The gift of the beauty of the flowers, the gift of the leaves that are edible. There's so many gifts around us.
So many.
The different trees, sugar maples.
The sunlight.
The sunlight right now.
On a day like today, you really feel that the content where it's like when the clouds come up, it's like whoo, and then sun comes back on your skin.
Right.
But you are speaking to what can be referred to as the pre-trans fallacy, where people, let's say, who are very much in the now on integral theory chart, that you know there's colors and all this stuff. So this would be in the orange modern level of development, which comes with it capitalism, scarcity mindset, and a metaphysical orientation toward the world where I am an isolated individual,
right?
And then the stuff is out there and it's just dumb, and my job is to manipulate it to gain things and you know extract
from it, extract knowledge, extract information, And
someone in that mindset will commonly refer to someone who's doing something like what your student building fairy houses and reconnecting, right? They will say, oh, well, great, you're having fun like doing child stuff, but let's get down.
Play.
Yeah, right, play.
We were talking about play earlier, right?
But like, let's do the serious stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's use our rational minds for the serious stuff. Here's the thing. There's a fallacy there that is conflating pre-rational and trans-rational, where your students are going through and getting glimpses of trans-rational states of being, because they've gone through the pre-rational, being children, and having that mystical connection from the true, naive childhood side of things, which is wonderful. And then it is understandable when people then get into the kind of rational mindset and they start kind of poo-pooing, oh, well, child's play, oh, whatever. But then there actually is this whole other realm that where after we have developed our rational capacities, we actually have a duty to tap into our trans-rational capacities, which we do when we make music together and we just do the various activities that you're talking about with your students. And this is the stuff that, you know, mystical and contemplative traditions for thousands of years have pointed toward. And it is so, well, I guess naive in its own way to denigrate all of that stuff as just woo-woo or, you know, oh, that's for children and not serious. And no, it's like the stuff of play in this spirit that's coming from this transrational place is very serious.
I think, you know, for me, giving students those opportunities to reconnect to other parts of themselves and each other, to play, you know, to mess around, to improvise, to, how you were just framing it, this kind of trans-rational openness and connectedness, is also about sort of redeveloping, practicing their kind of imagination skills.
Oh, yeah.
Which is core to it. And I think that work is incredibly serious in that, you know, helping students get into those, practice those skills and get into those mindsets is imperative for figuring out another way of being together.
Yeah.
And another way of thinking about society and how we could be together. And imagining not futures of doom and climate collapse and ongoing violence and, you know, ongoing consumption and all of the ways of thinking that racial capitalism has ingrained into us, but how do we imagine futures of abundance, futures of mutual flourishing, and imagine them? That's how we have to start. What is the world that we want to live in?
Yeah.
And tapping into that kind of imagination in that play is so crucial for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
Isn't this great?
Oh, is this one of those?
Yeah, we're walking by I mean, it's a fort, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the woods, made by the Kinderwoods, the kindergarten students at MYB, who come up here
nice.
once a week for the Kinderwoods program.
Oh, very
which,
cool.
you know, luckily started up again this year after so many years of hiatus from the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
I love this.
That's great.
Building little shelters in the woods.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want students at Choate to like tap back into
Right.
wonder and curiosity.
And, which is the very stuff that even the revered scientists who we might think of as, well, they're you know, being rational and like they don't care about this woo-woo mystical nonsense. No. So many of the most important scientific discoveries and technological inventions were discovered and created in these transrational states of mind. And Albert Einstein, you know, of course, famously talked about the importance of imagination.
Yeah.
He would do exactly what we're doing right now, just walk around in the woods. And of course, he's doing the equations and stuff on the board and all that stuff. But the critical insight of those aha moments, those come not from those furrowed brow critical thinking moments. They come from these spontaneous moments of inspiration, after which you then follow the insight up with the scientific method and go do the process and use your rational capacities. But you must cultivate the conditions in order to let imagination flourish first, or else you're just going to get a bunch of uninspired, banal BS.
But I think students will only allow themselves to experiment and play in that way if they feel safe, right? If they feel like they can make mistakes. Grades are not conducive to that. What's conducive to that is building a community of trust, community of hospitality and welcoming, a community of making mistakes.
Yep.
So that's the thing I've tried to hold on to from the pandemic.
Good. Yeah.
You know, you asked me before about like what do I try to maintain is like that kind of ethos.
Yeah, I very much get that. sense from, even if I'm just witnessing from my office, looking out onto the lawn and seeing something that you're doing with your students online, I'm not even hearing what's happening. I can tell that spirit
Morgan.
is alive there.
Thanks. You know the other thing I've been thinking about recently?
What?
Even earlier today when you reminded me we were going to have this conversation. I've been thinking about wellness, but I'm going to call it well-being because I like that more than the word wellness. And like figuring out how, I'll use the word wellness because everyone's familiar with it. Like how wellness can be not just a fad, not just a Band-Aid on a system that is inherently like creating a mindset of scarcity and unwellness, but how to like incorporate well-being into every dimension of the curriculum.
Yeah.
I know this is something you care about and
yeah.
do a lot of, which can look like things like, oh yeah, we're going to do like yoga or meditation at the beginning of F block on Tuesday mornings.
Yep.
But it can also be the way we conceptualize how to move through the content of our courses and what we're asking students to do, right? Like ultimately, I imagine these Thoreau projects that students just finished as, without framing it this way to them, being like, oh, you're cultivating more well-being into your life.
Right.
That's what you're doing.
Right.
And we might use reading Walden as like inspiration or provocation for doing that.
Do you have opportunities for students at midterm and end of term to essentially self-evaluate?
Mm-hmm. Different aspects of I've done different versions of it.
Yeah. Yeah, didn't you mention that you had, sometime this year, did you have students record a flip video as part of their self-evaluation process?
Yeah, I did for my climate change class. I don't think I used Flipgrid.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, but they just recorded
recorded
a video.
videos and then upload them to their Google Drive folder, and I watch them.
Nice.
They're great.
Right?
Man, I so loved, because it was like, tell the story of your experience in this course.
Yeah.
Your intellectual journey, your emotional journey.
Yeah.
Where did you start? Where are you now? And it was just, it was really inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't about comparing one student to the other or ranking them, but about like you're able to articulate in a powerful way how you've evolved.
Yes, well put.
Just, that's great. Can I also say we're standing over this weed? Mm-hmm. Do you know about this?
No.
No, broadleaf.
Right here?
Yeah, broadleaf or big leaf plantain.
Like the edible plantain?
So, no, not like the fruit you're thinking of, but that's what it's called, broadleaf plantain. It's a weed, right? Like Choate puts down fertilizer on main campus to get rid of this shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. Do we not?
Okay.
We don't swear in this, right?
There's been a couple
but I'm
swears here and there,
using that swear intentionally because it's like weeds are, framed as noxious.
Right.
Right, like dandelions.
And of course,
You know that every
they all
part
have
of
their purpose.
you know that every part of a dandelion is edible.
I did not know that.
Root, flowers,
Nice.
leaf, right? And so broadleaf plantain actually came with colonization. It's not a quote-unquote like native species to the Americas. It came from Europe, but it's been here so long that it's, I guess, become native in a certain way. And many indigenous communities, Robin Wall Kimmerer taught me this, and the Potawatomi, her community and nation, call it white man's footprint.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the names they have for it because it's linked to the beginning of colonization.
Yeah.
But even in this plant that is linked to such, historical and ongoing violence, right? This most violent of systems, even in a being akin, like Kimmerer would say, like this, there are gifts, right? And so broadleaf plantain is not edible for food, but it's an incredibly powerful medicine that can work to ease sunburns, mosquito bites, cuts, like it's an antiseptic, antibacterial. Again, we're reading Braiding Sweetgrass. We come to the courtyard of the KAC. I'm like, Let's look at what's under our feet right now.
Yep.
Where are the gifts that are all around us? So then it's also about like cultivating in students the habit, the practice of attentiveness, of paying attention to everything, even or especially what's beneath them, what's under their feet, right? And that there are gifts there too.
Yeah.
And of course, for me, like that, the art of paying attention, whether we're paying attention to the weeds, paying attention to the text we're studying in class, right? Like what we were talking about before, paying attention to each other in creating this community of hospitality and welcomeness, right? That like paying attention is what then is the ground on which attending to can occur.
Yeah.
Like tending to, like tenderness, right?
Yes,
So it's like getting from that, the practice of attention to a kind of ethical orientation to the world and to each other, of engaging with others with tenderness.
Wow, that's beautiful. Yeah. It's so funny. A word that could very easily be dismissed by it's like, oh, all right, soft. Yeah,
soft.
Okay, yeah, those soft skills are nice, but what are we really learning here? It's like, whoa,
right.
whoa, whoa.
Well, I mean, when
you
tenderize meat, you make it soft, right?
Right.
But in that softness is something quite strong.
Yeah.
Quite resilient.
Totally.
You're right. It could be framed in the same way that like play.
Yep.
Or messing around.
Wait, I'm so glad you brought this exact thread up, because just this weekend I had a student who's in moral reasoning right now, and he plays baseball. This student said, "Hey, Mr. Harris, are you on duty tonight?" No, I'm not on duty, but I'm in the backyard watching after our kids playing on the splash pad with their friends after school. Feel free to pop over. So he comes out from Tenny, and we have a little, like, you ever watch the show Home Improvement?
Yeah,
back in the day, yeah. So yeah. Wilson, that over the fence. So it was like, I'm in the yard, he's over the hedges on the other side. And he's like, "Yeah, Mr. Harris, I don't know what's going on. I've got the yips."
He's got the what?
The yips is this term I think that in both golf and baseball.
I know the golf.
Okay, yes.
Use.
So I guess in baseball too.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I got the yips. This has never happened to me before. I'm always locked in, but I'm just striking out. I think I've played myself out of a starting position now, and we have a game tomorrow, and I'm just like, don't know what to do." And I told him, so I don't think there's any panacea or anything. I'll say I also struggled with the mental side of baseball, so I totally feel you. And it's been a long time since I've been actively playing, so this is not going to come from any like, oh, I'm an athlete orientation. But I mean, we're in early spring right now. What are you doing when you walk between classes? Just walk and observe the abundance of life that is just bursting at the seams all around you, and how it changes subtly every single day, and all the different creatures and the sounds and this and that. And he's like, wow, yeah, okay. So he then, I guess, on Saturday morning kind of was walking around doing exactly that. I see him in class on Monday, and he brings up in the middle of the conversation, he's like, "Oh, by the way, I totally started doing that, and I had an incredible game on Saturday, and I'm back in it." And he was recommended to the whole class to really be attentive, as you were saying, to your surroundings as you are going about your day-to-day here. Because in doing that, you reconnect and reground yourself to everything that makes life worth living, and can give you the fuel and the motivation to persist through the various challenges that you're inevitably going to face with all of the stuff, all the intellectual stuff that we have to do. And so that's just another way in which these soft things, and like play and tenderness and these things, can actually serve the things that we say we value most in a success-oriented kind of culture. Like, you actually will be better at those hard skills by cultivating these soft skills.
Once you start noticing it, there's abundance everywhere, and then gratitude everywhere. And then that's the ground for Kimmer, like, you build cultures of abundance, then cultures of gratitude, and then cultures of reciprocity, which is that relationality and giving back. There's such abundance. I think we get caught up at Choate and don't notice it. There's an abundance of wisdom.
Oh my God, absolutely.
Spiritual and intellectual among faculty. We were talking about before about Microsoft Teams and moments of sharing. Yeah. Abundance.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you're doing with this podcast? Using this medium that can open space for unexpected tangents and paths and discoveries and connections, and to use that to highlight the kind of abundance of this might sound self-serving on the podcast, like I'm saying I have an abundance of like great ideas, but it's like the abundance collectively of our faculty.
Yeah.
To thoughtfully think through these shared philosophical questions.
Yes.
From lots of different viewpoints and from lots of different backgrounds and experiences. And that's really cool.
Appreciate that. I think that is exactly the idea. And it occurred to me, in fact, our delay in rescheduling this thing 7 times, it helped spark this additional insight of like what we should do with the podcast. So, in the first season, we released one each term, and I was like, hopefully people can listen to it on that. But it turns out, of course, we're all overworked. People don't exactly have a ton of time to be like, let me listen to an hour and a half long conversation. But take these conversations, and these are actually the core of the summer professional development experience. Rather than a 3-day drink from a fire hose conference, to spread it out over like 6 weeks, listen to one of these things each week and annotate it together and record a flipped response to it. So you kind of pitch into the conversation. So that all happens asynchronously, where people can, wherever they are, whenever they can, engage with these conversations that are treading on territory that just wouldn't come up in a more formalized conference kind of setting. And then there are these little seeds of potential inspiration that then people can cultivate as the summer goes on. Like, oh, well, they talked about doing this embodied, class start activity. Let me think about how I can do that in my classes. Or they're talking about collaborative annotation. Let me consciously build that into my Canvas courses now.
That's a cool idea. I think what you're talking about is cross-pollination.
Definitely.
Over time.
Yeah.
Morgan, this was a nourishing conversation.
I concur.
I'm like really great. I am really grateful for this. Plus, it was a great reason to be outside, get in the woods.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for
so many good things.
Yeah. We covered a lot of ground, literally and figuratively. There was a few things that you said that I've already started my wheels spinning in various different directions, and I hope that that is the case for anyone who's tuning in.
Absolutely.
To the recording too.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
But wait, what about the music recommendations? Yes, after we finished recording, we realized that despite talking about how music informs Stephen's teaching, we forgot to solicit a recommendation from him like we did with our other guests. So we touched base later on, and Stephen said he's been really into Ben Sollee, an Appalachian singer-songwriter and cellist, who we discovered we both have a personal connection to. Ben performed and led a workshop at Stephen's Environmental Literature Institute in June. And he also performed in 2015 at Limekiln Theater, the outdoor music venue that my wife and I and a couple friends used to run down in Virginia. Anyway, Ben is a great guy and an amazing performer who pushes the boundaries of what the cello can do. So go check him out.